What is up, basketball fans? Welcome to another live edition of the NBA Outlet. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Kory Waldron. Kory, how we doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I mean, I feel like every time we come on the pod, there's some sort of news or rumor or trade to talk about. So every day is Christmas. So I'm just living the dream.
Upon a ton of rumors that dropped today, we can maybe touch on those, but there was a pretty big trade. Mike Conley to the Utah Jazz. Obviously, we'll discuss the details in a sec. As always, thank everybody for listening, checking in, watching on YouTube, whatever it may be. You can find the pod on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Google Play, Dash Radio, and obviously, like I said, YouTube. But getting into the trade first, do you want to mention Space Jam? We got the lineup on that. And I know you didn't know who or what yet.
I mean, we could do Space Jam first. I'm actually dying to know because I have literally no idea who's in this movie or who's doing what. So please inform me.
So obviously we got the King, LeBron James in there, Klay Thompson, Dame Lillard, Anthony Davis, and then we also have two WNBA players. Let me just double check those two. But what do you think about the NBA players so far?
Is Klay going to be healthy to do Space Jam?
That's a good question. I mean, I think he should be okay. So we got LeBron, Dame Lillard, Anthony Davis, Klay Thompson, Diana Taurasi, and another WNBA players whose last name I can definitely not pronounce, so I'm not even going to embarrass myself. But I think it's pretty cool they got WNBA players in there too.
Yeah, it's important, especially with how the culture of basketball in general has been. There's been a lot of even movement on Twitter trying to push the WNBA, saying basketball is over, but it's not really over because the WNBA season is going on right now. So there is still basketball to watch. I love that they're integrating that into Space Jam. That's nice. And of course, it's a shout out to like the secondary stars, right? Davis, a guy who's been in a small market. Klay Thompson, the second to third fiddle on the Warriors. Obviously, Klay's just a lovable guy in general. And then the often underrated, slept-on Damian Lillard gets his shot in the movie too. So that's pretty cool.
Do you think it's funny that at all times, like all these NBA players were possible like Laker rumor targets? Obviously Anthony Davis, they just made the trade during the season. It was Dame Lillard, and leading up to the offseason before Klay tore his ACL, there was a lot of talk about him joining the Lakers.
Yeah, it's somewhat ironic. I mean, these are definitely all guys LeBron has had his eye on, both on the court and clearly off the court. So it is always entertaining to see that.
Yeah, I would call it more than ironic. I would think it's strategically planned by LeBron.
I wouldn't doubt it, to be honest.
It's like, hey, I'm going to help you out, get you some extra money in Space Jam, obviously. But back to the basketball
We can't give you the max. We can't give you the max for the Lakers, but I'll give you some Space Jam money.
It's like, why is Klay Thompson making $20 million to be in Space Jam? Like, that's something you could see really happen. But getting to the Mike Conley trade, this is a pretty substantial trade. Obviously, there was a lot of talk about this happening and Utah being the favorite. I think it just dropped off in recent rumors lately. But the details of the trade, Utah traded Jae Crowder, Kyle Korver, Grayson Allen, the number 23 pick in this year's draft, and a future first-round pick that's protected, most likely to convey in 2022. And obviously, the Jazz receive Mike Conley.
Yeah, I mean, I want to look at this from the Grizzlies side first. So they got rid of the last piece from the grit and grind era. Marc Gasol, obviously, the deadline last year. Mike Conley now. We all saw this coming. We actually probably all saw this coming for the last 2 years, but they held on for a year longer than they probably needed to. And, they get a nice pick at 23. They get a young guy in Grayson Allen who maybe could develop into a role player. Jae Crowder is a very serviceable stretch four. Or small ball four, small forward, and then Kyle Korver just kind of a throw-in, probably a buyout, I would figure. So it's good for Memphis because they've finally turned this page. They're full-on rebuild mode now. Then you look at the Jazz, they needed a point guard. This has been what they've been looking for the last year or so, somebody who can take the playmaking duties off of Donovan Mitchell, kind of take less pressure off him offensively, let him kind of just get some time to run off ball a little bit. I mean, they've really had to use him heavily in this Utah Jazz system. Now he has a guy who's not a tremendous scorer, but definitely a guy who can at least hit some threes, can create off the dribble, can probably get Rudy Gobert really going in the pick and roll as well. A very good defender, so he fits right into the Utah system and play style. It's a good side for both teams for where they want to be right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think in terms of both teams, it just makes a lot of sense. Like you said, on the Grizzlies side, there was a lot of talk about him getting moved at the deadline. Didn't happen. Now they move with Utah. Maybe a little bit better package. I know there were some other teams interested, Pacers, Pistons. So they ended up with going with Utah because they were willing to offer the 2 first-round picks. Grayson Allen, not necessarily an amazing prospect, but some potential as a role player. And you mentioned Jae Crowder and Kyle Korver. I could also see Memphis flipping those two for another bad contract and maybe pulling in a late first-round pick or something along those lines. I don't think alone they'd get you anything, but if they were willing to take on a bad contract in return, like a rebuilding team should, it would make a lot of sense for them. And then, like you mentioned, on the Utah side, this really pushes them forward. I mean, this gives them a true second option. You know, Joe Ingles had to be the second option last year, probably not his ideal role, better as your third option. Now you have Mitchell leading the show, somebody to take the pressure off him and also provides him with more spacing. You know, Conley's a solid three-point shooter, and then you push Ingles in the third option where he's kind of better off relying on other guys to create for him a little bit, get his three-point shooting up, and then obviously Gobert, another partner to work with a pick and roll. So I'm really liking what Utah did. Obviously, one negative of the deal, Conley's contract being $30 million plus, ate into a little bit of their salary cap. They're going to have a decision to make with Derrick Favors, obviously partially guaranteed contract, so they could possibly waive him, get some more cap space, maybe add more of a true stretch four, or they could try to use a sign and trade with him, which mentioned in the Zach Lowe piece. So I think still interesting for Utah what they're going to do to fill out the rest of this roster, because this boosts them up another level.
I think for Utah, the best case scenario, and I mentioned this the other day on Twitter, is probably moving Derrick Favors.
Yeah.
I love Derrick Favors, probably underutilized too for his role. I mean, there's probably a spot out there for him as a starting small ball five. Being paid $17 million to back up Rudy Gobert, it just isn't. I mean, it's a good safety blanket. Don't get me wrong. Rudy Gobert has caused some injuries, so it's been really nice to have Derrick Favors. But as you mentioned, the three-point shooting is what they need. I feel like Miracek kind of fits into the Utah Jazz plan. They wanted to get a stretch four. But I would definitely like to see them trying to make a move to get more shooting, because that's what this team really needs. They have a very good defense in place, but it's in the offense that's been the issue.
Yeah, and there's going to have some options if they do move Derrick Favors. You know, it's going to be interesting if a team is willing to take him on. I think ideally on a starting lineup, he's your five, not your four, like the Jazz obviously play him as. So I think there will be teams interested too. You know, also, even if a team is just looking to get rid of some cap and they pick up Favors just to waive his contract, I think Favors is a good player and you don't want to necessarily cut him. But if you're looking for that extra cap space, you can get yourself $10 million plus by waiving him. So I'm really intrigued to what Utah is going to do the rest of the year to fill out the roster. Obviously, we know Jae Crowder played a pretty important role for them. He was a nice guy that they played, like you mentioned, at the four, not as much at the three. They need to find a couple more guys, and then you could argue that the Jazz could be contenders next season.
I mean, we've been talking about this, right, the last couple of weeks. Now, with the Warriors having Durant and Klay Thompson out likely for the season, this has kind of opened up the West, right? We have LeBron and AD and whatever the Lakers look like already as that top four seed. Some could say that they're already the best team in the NBA. I'm not going to go that far. But I think this move for Mike Conley for the Jazz, it makes them at least a home court favorite, I think, as of now. Even with the pieces they have, because relatively the core of the Utah Jazz is coming back. They lost Rubio and got Mike. They've lost Rubio, Jae Crowder, Grayson Allen, and Kyle Korver for Mike Conley to this point.
Yeah, and I think Mike Conley, Ricky Rubio and Mike Conley is an upgrade. It's a pretty big upgrade considering what the weaknesses are or were of the Jazz. Now that they add that spacing, which has been a major issue for them. There was lineups last year, I think we talked about on a previous show. Some of their best lineups included no point guard. And that Now they have a point guard that's not going to be a negative. And Conley is a solid defender too. So he kind of fits in that role. You know, there is a little concern with age and contract and then, you know, a little injury history for him too.
It feels like they're going into an all win now mode. I mean, Joe Ingles isn't very young either. I mean, if you keep Derrick Favors, he's in the mid to late 20s. But it feels like it's like their win now chance. And luckily, if your win now chance does fail, Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert are still young enough that you can still, 2-3 years from now, after a Mike Conley era, you can try to rebuild and retool again for another run. But this just feels like a win now move, which we've seen now, by the Toronto Raptors going after Kawhi. Teams are being more gamblish now to take on these guys to try and win it all when the window's there.
And I think this kind of signals, and I think most people would say this as well, the Jazz probably weren't super confident in terms of landing a big free agent this summer. So they go out and trade for one. They make it a little bit easier. Maybe it's a slight overpay for Mike Conley in terms of his contract, but you play in Utah, small market, you got to make moves like that. And I really do agree with you. I think that they're easily probably a top 4 seed. They're probably a top 4 seed, last year if everything kind of goes right. Now, you look at them, they have Mike Conley. Like, they're not a team you want to face in the playoffs, especially defensively. They're really good, and the problem has been the offense. Now you add a solid offensive player like Conley, they could easily end up in the Western Conference Final and how they fill out the rest of the roster.
Yeah, definitely. I think also one of the biggest parts, too, as you kind of alluded to, is the fact that with, Mike Conley taking the Utah Jazz job at the starting point guard position, that means a bunch of other teams just lost the ability of a point guard, right? So the Phoenix Suns, the Indiana Pacers, the Brooklyn Nets obviously got their guy, but the Boston Celtics, Chicago Bulls, all of these teams looking for a point guard, one less guy is off the market now. And we're looking more so, and Minnesota Timberwolves are another team looking for a point guard, which makes D'Lo, again, a name that we've mentioned. We won't go probably too much in depth, but a guy that there's less suitors for now.
Yeah, we went pretty in depth on the point guard preview. You could obviously check that out: iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, YouTube, all the sources of the podcast. But it is interesting because it's one less team that's interested, and now those other teams are going to be a little bit more aggressive because there's one less point guard out there. So the likelihood of D'Angelo Russell probably getting a max contract improves. Even guys in the lower tier, Malcolm Brogdon, maybe he gets picked up a little bit. Maybe even Terry Rozier sees a little bit more money just because there's one less guy out there. And I think it was a good move for the Grizz to make this move now because now they have another draft pick going to the draft tomorrow. They can get into this rebuild. And like we talked about, there's some potential with the rest of the roster to trade some guys and maybe add some more picks or future picks.
Yeah, that's the one good thing that you alluded to this before as well. Jae Crowder is a guy who pretty much fits on like any NBA team, realistically, a 3-and-D guy. You get what you get with him. He plays hard. So it's a guy at the deadline or December 15th is probably when he becomes available again, I believe, after being traded. This is going to be a guy that plenty of teams want if they're going to make him available.
Yeah, I agree. I think he has a role in a lot of teams. He's just necessarily probably a guy you bring off the bench, can give you some hustle, has some playoff experience. He's willing to get gritty and tough. So there's definitely going to be some attraction for him, and it doesn't really make sense for him to stay in Memphis. Anything else on the Memphis side you're looking at in this trade?
No, I just think it signifies the rebuild is officially here. You got some nice guy, you got another nice young piece in Grayson Allen. You get the draft pick, as we mentioned, at 23, another draft pick for the future. Just see what happens. Memphis has gone full rebuild. I think Jaren Jackson Jr., of course, is going to be the guy we're looking at primarily. But they're in a good spot.
And then they're most likely, obviously, they're number 2 tomorrow, going to probably draft Ja Morant. So now you have your point guard, you have your big of the future. Now you're looking maybe with one of the late picks, you take a swing and hopefully land someone who could be another future starter for you.
I graced over that big detail.
What do you think Memphis will be doing in the offseason? I think they opened up a little bit more cap space with the Mike Conley trade.
I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they went after some lower end vets. Nothing crazy, but guys who can kind of mentor some of these young guys just to help push them along. But they're not going to lock in any mid to high level stars or anything like that. They're not going to go after key vets because they don't really need that. They just need guys who can kind of mentor these guys. The Jared Dudleys, maybe even the Rondos. I don't think those are necessarily the names, but guys like that.
Yeah, obviously Valanciunas opted out. They're trying to get a long-term deal with him as well. He played really well for them last season. I think they would be interested in maybe throwing an offer sheet at somebody. Obviously they did it last year with Kyle Anderson. That didn't necessarily work out for them. But going after some of the young players too that have some upside and maybe they'd get more playing time and a shot in Memphis. What do you think in terms of, Woj mentioned today on the ESPN NBA draft preview, he expects a lot of trades tomorrow. You had to give me 3 teams you think are a lock to make a trade tomorrow. Who would they be?
Pelicans would be one, right? The 4th pick's got to get moved. There's been rumors about the Pacers being interested in that pick and just moving into the lottery in general. So I'll throw the Pacers in. Kevin Pritchard, too, already has said right after the season ended, they plan on being really aggressive this year. So maybe this is where they try and make a splash. And lastly, a team looking to make a trade. Maybe it's the Celtics. The Celtics have 3 first-round picks, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think Celtics and Hawks both have a lot of first-round picks. And to be honest, nobody really wants to go into the season, especially unless you're in the first step of your rebuild. You don't want to go into the season with 3 rookies.
Yeah, so I see the Celtics definitely moving one of their picks. And then, like you said, I think Atlanta's been a team that's been around in a lot of rumors already for the 8th pick, the 10th pick, and they have another mid-teen pick, I believe. 17,
yeah. They got 8, 10, and 17. A lot of talk with Cleveland, I think, about moving up to there. They had some talks, I think, with the Knicks.
Possibly Kevin Love even in that deal, right? That was some rumblings too?
I could maybe see that. I think if I was at Atlanta, I think that'd be a little too soon to add a star. I'd be more interested in trying to move up and get a player that you really like. We do have someone in the chat, Alejandro looking for some OKC trades. Who rumor came out today they're willing to move some of their vets. Steven Adams, Dennis Schroeder, Roberson. What do you think about that?
I mean, first of all, Roberson, I don't know what the market is. We haven't seen him. He was supposed to come back last year. They kept pushing his return date farther and farther and farther back.
I believe he re-injured himself during the rehab, so that's why he essentially didn't play obviously at all last year.
Which is to me just even more worrisome. For that fact that he's banged. That was a really bad knee injury too.
It was a patella tendon knee injury, yeah, which is extremely bad. Same thing Jeremy Lin had, and obviously he lost a step.
Yeah. And then Dennis Schroeder, I don't see many options for Dennis Schroeder. It feels like they already got Dennis Schroeder for the relatively cheap. Trying to get him out of Atlanta. So that's kind of like you're gonna probably eat that one. And then Steven Adams, I mean, there is a market for Steven Adams without a doubt. One of the best offensive rebounding centers in the NBA. A very good defensive anchor, just a good team guy, I feel like, in general too. I don't think there's a single player who hates him on the Thunder, maybe even in the league. So, and again, he's an easy double-double guy. So I think there's a big market for Steven Adams. They slightly overpaid him, obviously, to keep him originally. So if they're going to make a move that they want to get some flexibility, it's probably Steven Adams that they move, because center is probably one of the easier positions to replace, or at least go from a guy like Steven Adams to get someone who's more competent if you need more shooting, which is what the Thunder desperately need.
Yeah, and you mentioned Steven Adams' contract, $25 million next year, $27 million the next year.
Yikes.
It's a lot of money. I wouldn't necessarily be super interested in that contract. It was more around the $20 million mark because he is limited. There's only so much you can do offensively. Excellent screen setter, probably one of the best in the league. Like you mentioned, really good rebounder, solid presence in the paint, a few post moves, but has no jump shot, doesn't really help your spacing and kind of clogs things up, especially when you already have a guy like Westbrook who likes to live in the paint. So I'm not sure what the market is going to be for him. They could definitely get value. I don't think it'll be a dump or anything like that, but I don't think there'll be as many teams interested because, like you mentioned, you can find centers that can kind of do that at a lot cheaper price, not as well, but when the price tag in terms of contributions, in terms when you're trying to balance them out, doesn't necessarily make sense to pay a center $25 million.
Your hope would be that some team kind of like, and I'm not even saying this is just the first team that came to mind, not that this would be a place, but like the Charlotte Hornets. Maybe they're just like, oh, we need to get somebody into. Maybe they package like a Marvin Williams maybe they do a sign and trade with Jeremy Lamb package where they can at least OKC gets two guys who can shoot, and then they give up a center who can then at least be some sort of help for Kemba. That's just the first scenario I thought of just now off the top of my head.
Sacramento popped in my head. I'm not sure why, but
they're looking for a center. Willie Cauley Stein, a free agent. I think that's that. I mean, and they have plenty of assets that I'm sure OKC would be interested, especially in the fact that they have a lot of guys who can score.
Yeah, and guys that can shoot. And I think you look at it is Steven Adams gives you a veteran that kind of help you take that next step. Like I said, I think he's a little overpaid, but Sacramento's probably not going to get any big-time free agents, so it would kind of make sense for them to make a move over there.
Yeah, definitely.
What other players or teams you see making possible moves tomorrow or anything like that?
I mean, Miami seems really eager to jump into the fray. Obviously, they locked all that money up into guys they're regretting big time, and Goran Dragic. Hassan Whiteside will make $27 million next year, which is bad.
Yeah.
And they're kind of stuck right now. So I know Ryan Anderson, $21 million too on the books. So they definitely want to try and move some money. Can they move anybody? I'm not sure. I know there's rumors they want Jimmy Butler, rumors they want to try and get another draft pick. So I wouldn't be surprised if Pat Riley tries to make a move on draft night.
Yeah, they're the one team that I heard had interest in Andrew Wiggins.
I heard they have interest. Oh no, never mind. That's a fake Twitter trade where Wiggins ends up in Houston for Chris Paul to Boston.
Oh yeah,
or Hayward to Minnesota.
Yeah, I saw that too. I think actually like Andrew Wiggins to Miami would be one situation where I would maybe feel a little bit positive about Andrew Wiggins getting better. Like
because he's with Spoelstra and Pat Riley.
Yeah, and they've done pretty good with the young players. Other than like Hassan Whiteside, it just hasn't really worked out. Like Winslow's done well there. Richardson's improved his game. Bam's looked really good. Like that's one situation where I'd be like, all right, maybe there's something in this Wiggins.
And am I crazy for thinking that Dwayne Wade will probably be hanging around the Miami Heat facility in the upcoming years? Like I feel like he was already kind of close to that team. I wouldn't be surprised if he's not coaching or whatever. He's already mentioned how he's going to like try to hop into therapy, probably after missing basketball. I wouldn't be surprised if he's like a guy who just helps the team, like a Steve Nash does to the Warriors, which could also benefit Wiggins just to have a different type of guy kind of mentoring him through the shit. Just a thought.
I think Wade would probably be around a little bit, but Wade comes off to me, especially obviously married to Gabrielle Union, that he'll just be out kind of living his life. Like I can just see him doing all types of crazy
I mean, he's
stuff.
already chugging wine a lot.
Yeah, and playing a lot of golf. Like I think he'll be around, but I think he'll also just be doing his own thing. Living life without basketball, at least trying to.
Yeah.
Any other teams that kind of pop up to you that can make a move tomorrow? Or any rumors that stuck out to you today? What do you think about actually, we got to touch on Al Horford. We haven't even mentioned that.
Oh.
But that was somewhat of a surprise. A lot of talk was, all right, he'll opt out and then he'll re-sign with the Celtics on a long-term deal. Now it looks like he's a lock to leave Boston, and there's a rumor of a team willing to offer him 4 years, $100 million.
I mean, I asked this question yesterday in the group chat and then on Twitter of what the price tag range would be for Al Horford. Because personally, Al Horford's age, I'm looking at somewhere between 15 and 20 million. And it looks like the Celtics were okay with giving him, 3 years, 20 million a year is what they probably look like they were comfortable giving him. Maybe even 3 years, 65 million. And obviously he wants 4 years because this is going to be his last contract. I think we can probably agree on that. At least the last contract of very good or at least somewhat decent basketball, Al Horford. I mean, this is the guy who do a little bit of everything, so I'm not surprised there's a market for him. I mean, this is a winner. This is it's an us guy, not a me guy. It's never about Al Horford. He plays team basketball. He looks to a very good defender, very good screener, underrated passer, can hit the three. I mean, there's nothing to dislike about Al Horford besides the fact that he's going to be 34. I mean, that's probably the only thing you don't like about Al Horford at this point in time. Probably a little bit of overpay if you're paying him more than 20 million. I will say that. I don't think I feel comfortable paying Al Horford, 24 million in year 4 when he's 38 years old. I think that's troublesome. But for these next 2 years, at least whatever deal he signs, this is going to be a guy who, if he's on a team that's contending or competing for a title, they'll be in a better place for one.
Yeah, I feel like if you're a team just on the cusp and you sign Al Horford, he's giving you a major impact on both ends of the floor. Like you mentioned, he does a lot of the little things that really don't stick out. He's another guy who sets great screens, defensively very smart. One of the only players who's had real success against Joel Embiid in the post. Makes him a little bit more attractive to the Eastern Conference teams trying to make a push.
Sneaky strong. He's a sneaky strong guy because you don't see Al Horford and think, oh, that's a tough guy to get through, but he actually is a really strong lower base. Where do you think? The rumors, of course, were the Lakers and Pacers last night. Where do you see him ending up?
There's been some more talk of possibly Dallas being interested. I saw.
Say it.
Well, the Nets. I honestly really love what Al Horford can bring. Like you said, I think you're definitely overpaying him probably in the third year. Ideally, if you're doing the 4-year contract, you either want a team option for the fourth year or a partial guarantee. That way you can get out of it. I honestly feel like Al Horford's a guy you might overpay in terms of long-term, but you'll probably be underpay him in terms of the first 2 years because his overall impact is probably just as much of an all-star without kind of messing up and disrupting your team. I would love him on the Nets. I think that he would just be a perfect guy, help you a lot defensively, gives you that type of veteran that helps you out offensively, stretches the floor. He could be your 5 in your closing lineup, and you could always start him at your 4. And I think as he transitions into the third and fourth year of the contract, you'd see him more as your 5, maybe your backup 5 or your first big off the bench, depending on who your other starters are.
Yeah, to me, the two teams I like the most are the Pacers and Nets. And I think they just fit. I think the cultures fit him well too, where there's not a lot of me guys on either one of these teams. Obviously, if the Nets get Kyrie, that may be a different story because of Kyrie's own personal stuff. But you slide in Al Horford, the defensive schemes, the mentality of it's next man up. I think that's something Al Horford flourishes in. Thinking about the Lakers, I could see him being good for them, but at the same time, I don't think they could be good for him. And I think that would be where the issue is. And also, with their money issues, locking up a lot of money into AD and Al Horford, we don't have a lot of shooters. Just seems like we're near the same issue of last year with the lack of floor spacing with them.
Yeah, I was surprised to see the Laker rumors. In my eyes, it just didn't really make sense. Because in your closing lineup, Al Horford's probably best as your 5. AD's best as your 5 in the closing lineup. And let's not act like LeBron's a small forward anymore. He's getting up there in age. His best position is probably power forward now. It just never really made sense in my eyes, especially.
It was almost always power forward in a way.
As soon as he went to Miami, it just seemed like power forward was the best spot, at least in, your closing lineup. Starting wise at the 3, that's fine. But when you're finishing the game, his versatility is best at the 4.
Yeah.
So I like Dallas though too. I think he's a really nice piece to put next to Porzingis. Like if you bring back Porzingis, then you have Luka. Like you have some really smart players, and then if you're able to, find some decent guards to put out there, that's a pretty good team.
Yeah, I mean I don't think a team's ever competing for a title with Al Horford, but I think Al Horford's the piece that at least that team starts to gain playoff experience with Al Horford, and then when he moves on, it's when they have money to go after an actual star to probably actually start competing. If we're just talking about timeline.
Yeah, and I think that's why the Pelicans were also mentioned as well. They wouldn't necessarily be a championship team, but he could be a nice vet to have around to kind of get these guys in shape and show them how to play playoff basketball. And he might just be enough to push them into a playoff team, a team like New Orleans. So
yeah,
I'm intrigued. He definitely changed the NBA landscape by opting out, because I anticipated him either opting in or, obviously $30 million is a lot of money. And then also if he did opt out, I thought it was like almost a guarantee Boston wasn't going to lose him. Boston's kind of in shambles right now. People won't admit it, but they just went from losing their two best players. Kyrie Irving and Al Horford are probably going to be gone this summer.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a weird 5 years, really, for Boston now that we have everything in front of us, right? I mean, they got all these assets. The goal was clearly AD in mind. Maybe you could say it was DeMarcus Cousins or AD, but it was definitely one of these two big guys were the guys they wanted to target. They wanted to get a centerpiece into Boston. You get all these assets from the Nets trade, whatever. You draft decently well. You get the Kyrie trade, and Kyrie was really, whether you want to blame him or not, this is the piece that kind of made everything crumble, because the hope was to pair Kyrie with another superstar. Obviously, to throw in the Gordon Hayward injury. I mean, just a lot of stuff went bad over the last 2 years relatively quickly for this organization, and it's a little bit in shambles. I mean, the only bright side of this is, and, maybe it's me being a little bit of an optimist, is, yes, you're losing Kyrie. You didn't give up overly too much for Kyrie, because obviously they took Colin Sexton with the 8th pick. They traded Isaiah Thomas, obviously has never been the same. Jae Crowder is solid, but you didn't lose much in that trade. The Hayward signing looks pretty bad. The losing Horford, at least he's getting up there in age, so you're not maybe overpaying for him to be a little bit too old at the end of the deal. And you still have Tatum and Brown. So it's not a complete loss, but again, this was last year supposed to be 67 wins and a title, and now we're at maybe they get 44 wins or 42 wins. They're a low playoff seed, and maybe they can bring in another guy the following year. Yeah, like we don't like now we're not even talking about a playoff team possibly.
Yeah, like unless they have to bring in a point guard. Like Terry Rozier's your starting point guard, I do not feel good. And people will be like, well, they went to the Eastern Conference Finals.
You better hope Gordon Hayward comes all the way back and Terry Rozier's your starting point guard.
I think that's where it all started. Like they put big money into Gordon Hayward, and when they did sign him, he was very good. Fringe top 5 small forward in the league, had an impact on both ends of the floor, and then he goes down. And then there were reports came out, I think by Jackie McMullen, that him coming back really hurt the chemistry of the team, because Brad Stevens was trying to force feed him and get him going, and people are getting upset. Obviously, Kyrie played a part in that too. But I think it was also just a lot of players not living up to expectations, almost having too many good players on the team that needed too many touches, that played completely different roles the last year. I think they missed a window. Like that's trade from the Nets. Like that's one of the most lopsided trades in NBA history, and they didn't capitalize on it. Yeah, they have Brown and Tatum, and they'll carry them on, but they had so many assets for a 5-year window that they needed to make a big trade, and Danny Ainge was just too busy trying to rip people off instead of trying to just make that move and bring in your star and maybe slightly overpaying. Like if they land Kawhi last year, they're probably NBA champions. You know what I mean? There's not really anything about it. Do they land Paul George? Maybe they should have traded for Paul George or Jimmy Butler, and then they're talking about a different team. A lot of things went wrong, but I also think they just missed an opportunity to land all those, take all those draft picks. And yeah, the trade for Kyrie, they didn't give up a lot, but that number 8 pick probably could have been traded for somewhere else at another time and got you something. So I just feel like they blew a window. Yeah, they'll be okay moving forward, but they really need to get a championship after a trade like that.
Yeah, I mean, the expectation. I mean, this was supposed to be the title year, right? I mean,
you close to it at least.
At least, or even, I mean, you can even say last year was right. At least the start of it, and then everybody gets hurt, so it kind of falls apart. And then, or the year before, then last year was probably the next best year, and now it looks like we're 4 or 5 years away, possibly even considering the Celtics even like competing for a title, possibly. Yeah. So I agree. I mean, if you went all in on this trade with the Nets, got rid of Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, and that regime, and you didn't get anything for it, you got an Eastern Conference final appearance 2 years in a row. 2 years in a row.
Yeah, and I mean, they do have Brown and Tatum, so don't take that away from them. They could both turn out to be really good players and building blocks of the future, but still kind of an unknown. And the window just kind of expands. They were in this rebuild, which kind of started with that trade. Now it feels like they're almost slightly back in a rebuild because there's been a lot of talk about them trying to move up in the draft or getting young players to kind of keep building and moving forward with this core. We do have a couple comments in the chat. Regular checking in SSV, Jazz, Western Conference Finals for sure. What do you think about that?
I'm not going to say for sure. We still got to see how rosters are constructed. I will say they're a home court favorite, but I can't say they're for sure going to have a better team on paper between the Lakers, Rockets. Even if throw in the Nuggets, they're not losing a lot. They're only going to get better. Another place I wouldn't mind Al Horford going, maybe if you wanted to. It could be a weird fit, maybe next to Jokic, but I wouldn't hate seeing him in a smaller role there. But yeah, there's a lot of teams in the West still. It's wide open.
Like Denver. I like Denver. Obviously, they were probably going to lose Paul Millsap. I'm not 100% sold on the Horford fit, but Woj was talking about Michael Porter Jr. looking really, really good. And I think a lot of people forgot that they have him. And he was supposed to be, a top 3 pick if healthy last year. So adding a player like that, oh my God, they're just adding a surge. Jokic is probably going to get better. Jamal Murray's going to get better. Gary Harris will probably get better. They have a lot of young guys in that team that can still get better. We know a lot of the role guys stepped up, Craig, Malik Beasley. So I'm intrigued. Denver's the team that, I love since last offseason.
I want to say this, and this reminds me. I saw a rumor that Denver was in slight conversations with AD, but they wouldn't put Jamal Murray in the package.
Yeah. I think it's fair, though, because
is it because you fear Anthony Davis won't re-sign that you don't put Jamal Murray in?
Yeah, I think that's okay. And then you don't have a point guard, too.
Because I personally think, though, a Jokic AD combo to me is almost beautiful. I almost love the thought of that. But I agree.
The top 5 bigs in the league.
Yeah, it's the same reason why Ainge didn't want to pull the trigger with Tatum. Is the fact that if Anthony Davis doesn't re-sign, you just lost this young star who can develop. So I get it, but I thought that would be an interesting pairing.
The worst trade offer that I saw from a team that had a little bit of confidence in re-signing Anthony Davis was the Knicks. They were only willing to offer Frank Ntilikina, I want to say Dennis Smith Jr., and then the number 3 pick. They weren't even willing to offer Kevin Knox or Mitchell Robinson. And there was plenty of reports saying that the Knicks were one of the destinations that AD would resign.
That's classic Knicks.
Yeah, I was surprised because I always felt that if they got AD, they become arguably the number 1 destination in free agency because they have all this space, they have the young assets, they have the the glamour of playing in New York, and they just were scared to pull the trigger. I get giving up assets, but Anthony Davis is a generational player. It's not like we're talking about somebody who's top 15 or borderline all-star. We're talking about superstar, pure superstar, and on-tap superstar that hasn't even hit the highest level yet.
And if you're the Knicks, you had money that if you get Anthony Davis, you're likely going to attract another star on the market.
Or 2. You easily could have got Kyrie and
if they have $72 million available. The Knicks have $72 million in cap available.
And it's crazy. And they might not end up doing really anything with it, which
isn't bad. And also, let's say that, though. It's not bad if you have a lot of cap and don't spend it. The Kings have $62 million. You don't have to spend all that if you can't. I think that's something that we've seen in the years past where guys are oh, well, we got all this cap. We just got to throw the money out there. You don't necessarily have to use all of it just because.
Yeah, you have to hit a quota in terms of the NBA amount. You do have to spend a certain amount of it, but you have to be smart and sign short-term deals. If you sign 1 or 2 year deals, you're okay. If you sign a 4-year deal to an old player, you're screwed because now you're overpaying him for the next couple of years when your young guys are blossoming. I think ideally what the Knicks probably should do is take on some more bad contracts, gather some assets, let these young guys develop. And then all of a sudden when, RJ Barrett, who they're going to probably draft tomorrow, Kevin Knox, Mitchell Robinson, I'm not really sure about Dennis Smith Jr. I'm not really sold on him. Maybe get another point guard. Now these guys are in their prime. You have literally 10 first-round picks that you could trade for a superstar or a star when they pop along. So play it smart. Another comment in the chat, Lee Custon. It's funny the Nets turned out to have a brighter future than the Celtics.
Who?
Lee Keston.
No. What did he say? What was the question?
He said the Nets have a brighter future than the Celtics.
Oh, yes. Okay. I thought I misheard the way you read the question. I thought you said something else.
Yeah, I think it is interesting. I'm not completely locking it in, but the Nets are in a really good position where they could sign 2 big stars this year and arguably be a contender next season.
I think there's also something to be said for the fact that the Celtics just kind of have this bad rep in general of where it feels like not necessarily players want to go there because of just like Danny Ainge necessarily. I know there's been that tie with Clutch that they just don't want to deal with the Celtics. So I think that plays into it. And like you mentioned, the culture, everyone on the Celtics was miserable last year. I mean, It was a miserable team. The Nets were known to have one of the funnest teams. The bench mob obviously was constantly being shown, them dancing and celebrating. So you're going into a much different environment in general. You have similar, if not better, rookie or young star players in Karis LeVert, Jared Allen. Spencer Dinwiddie is still relatively young. Joe Harris is still relatively young. And, if you bring back D'Lo, obviously that's probably unlikely at this point. That's still a young guy. So, yeah, I think the Nets are just in a better position. You made the playoffs for the first time finally last year. You were competitive in that series. You maybe have one or two guys different or whatever the case may be. You maybe win that series. So I think you're in a good place here in Brooklyn. It's definitely brighter, I think.
And I think the Celtics might have two better prospects than some of the Nets guys, depending on what happens with D'Angelo Russell. But the Nets have more young players across the board because throw in Rodion's Krooks in there, and then also they just traded for Taurean Prince. I think there's a lot of potential there. And then Musa, who didn't even play last year for the Nets, is essentially going to be a rookie this season. I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued what Brooklyn can do, and they played it really well. The Celtics probably played it a little bit wrong in their situation, but some of it was just, bad luck with the Gordon Hayward injury. A lot of that will get overlooked, but that really hurt them in a major way. It
really changed everything. I mean, it happened 6 minutes into what was supposed to be the start for this little dynasty run they were building. Then, of course, him coming back and having to be force-fed, as the report said, and that disrupting the flow. And then, as we mentioned, them having an Eastern Conference Finals appearance the year before without Kyrie and Gordon Hayward. And all those young guys getting a taste of starter, big-time minutes being the guy moments. It threw everything out of whack. And it shows, too, that it's probably best to have a 7 to 8 man deep rotation and roster, not the 8 to 9 man rotation deep that the Celtics had, with a lot of those guys wanting to play the upwards of 25 to more minutes.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's a hard situation, especially I think a lot of it is the previous season they played so many minutes. If they never got that taste of playing all those minutes, it wouldn't matter as much because they're
being good. And not even just getting a taste of playing the minutes, but being a game away from the NBA Finals without Kyrie and Gordon Hayward. It makes you and playing against LeBron James of all people and being that close. It's like, yeah, Kyrie Hayward, we know you're good, but you saw what we did, right? This was us. We were almost right there. We also beat the Bucks and Antetokounmpo ourselves without you guys in the first round. So yeah, I think that definitely just plays a huge factor.
And I think some of the perception though from the Celtics players, oh, we did this on our own, but let's be honest, that Eastern Conference playoff picture was pretty bad.
It was a weaker. If you're looking at Antetokounmpo and the Bucks, we're still a year away from being really good. The Raptors had the same old playoff Raptor issues.
And they played the Sixers, and the Sixers weren't ready. Ben Simmons had all the turnovers. JJ Redick, they didn't have the pieces they had this year. And then even getting to the Cavs, that was not a good Cavs team.
No,
they had LeBron. And that's pretty much why they won. Everything else is what it is. So I think the perspective of that probably rubbed some people the wrong way in terms of that locker room. It'll be interesting what happens with them, and a lot of teams, they'll have cap space. There's even been talk about them maybe going after D'Angelo Russell.
Definitely.
So anything else, Kory, in terms of rumors or anything like that? We'll be live again tomorrow after the draft, recapping that, and probably what seems like a lot of trades will happen tomorrow.
No, I think we're good on that.
All right, guys, as always, appreciate you checking in. Obviously, iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, GGBasketball.com, Google Play, Dash Radio, and YouTube. And like I said, live show tomorrow after the draft, so make sure to check that out on YouTube.
Peace out, Knuckleheads.
Good stuff, Kory.
I thought that was